Hi everyone, so I'm doing a bit of a beginner's video today, so I'm just going to try and cover some of the basics and then try and paint up a tower for our warrior. So I've got all the tools that I'll hopefully need. So I've got my paints, which I've lined up by stages, so the orange parts of the armour, base coats, armor panels, cloth, and then details. Other tools that I've got, sorry, this is in my hand at the minute because the bench won't go back far enough. So it's a handy tool, you don't have to use it, but it is quite convenient to keep grip on the model without having to touch it so much. Plastic glue, sanding sticks. I've got 3 paintbrushes for this project. I've got flow improver, 2 files, my parts ready, clean water, palette and snips. Okay, so I'll get the camera set up and then we can make a start. Okay, so when I normally get a squad of models in that I'm not going to be working on straight away, just try and save space, I'll trim everything out of the sprue and then put them into containers. So I've got Imperial Guard Heavy Weapon Squad, or Astra Militarum as they're called now. I've just snipped everything out. Anything where it's say pairs of arms or stuff that can be easily mixed up with something else, I'll try and keep them together. They're normally reasonably close on the sprue, or just keep the numbers with them. For this reason, the tower I've already cut out, and I've just taken this one out of the tub. So just to show you from the start, so I've got this sprue of Snapfix Death Guard. Now when you get your sprue and you've got your side cutters, it's better to use side cutters than the other version than just like a normal pair of cutters, as they've got more of a diamond cut on them, whereas these will be reasonably flush. However, something to be aware of is if you are going right down onto the surface and then snipping, it can cause snapping of the plastic. So what I tend to do, try and get as close as I can, is I'll leave a small amount of plastic just on the other side and then cut. So we've got a little tag of plastic left there. We can see where we've flush cut down here. Now on thicker tags of plastic, you can see it's not so much cut through here. I'm really sorry if this doesn't show up. I'll try and see if it's something plain to put underneath. Should have thought about this beforehand. Okay, hopefully that's dealt with the focusing issue. So on the thicker tags of plastic, instead of it cutting smoothly through it, it actually cracks it off. And the danger that you can have is if it cracks it and actually goes and takes part of the plastic that you want, as in detail of the side of the model, you've then got a hole, because you'll smooth it down and it'll be a depression in the plastic depending on how far you smooth it down, or it will look like a scraggy notch. Whereas if you leave a bit off and you get a file, you can then slowly take it down and you've got a lot more control over it. Then you can be aware of other detail that's surrounding it. to there. So that's smoothed out almost completely in line with the detail of the model. So just an example, we'll see how these have turned out. So that one's turned out reasonably smooth, it's still catching a little bit, whereas that one, that's left a real divot in it. So in order to get that out, to make that smooth, you then taking some of that detail out, and if it's on armour panels or anything like that, it can cause quite a bit of a problem. So that's removing them from the sprue. Now I generally use 2 different files. I'll try and find a good example. So on the body part, now this is one of the old Fire Warriors. I wanted to get this one because the mould lines on the new models, a lot of the new sprues, they've either been able to hide them along with panel lines, or the lines that you won't see where they join up with other parts, or they're just a lot smoother. Sometimes you can get a near perfect sprue where you've barely got any tidying up to do, whereas this has actually got quite a bad sprue mould line. So we can see it there along the back of the shoulder, travelling down the side and then meeting up. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it off. So the coarse stuff, we can take that off. Now when you're filing, just be careful where you've got the line of detail there. So try and get the edge of your file, and use the side of your thumb if you want to, and just work on that bit. So right, just haven't got a monitor set up to see when I'm out of frame. So just following the line of detail, and then moving on to the raised detail. So doing the raised detail first here, get back of the neck, and then finding the line of detail and then just keeping to the side of it. So that's a coarse file that I use, and it's got a reasonably good shape on it because it's got a bit of filing on the side as well, which gives me a right angle point for getting in, or a flat to get into the narrow areas. Now the other file that I use, and again this is quite a handy shape, is one that Games Workshop do. Now there are cheaper ones out there, and Games Workshop used to do different ones to these. These are what I call dipped. So they've got the file and they've dipped it in glue and then just scattered on the abrasive. The only problem with that is the abrasive eventually comes off, whereas these are actually cut into the metal, so these generally last a bit longer. But this is a much finer grade than the other one. So once you've done your course pass, you can then go around and anything that still looks a bit rough, or you need a bit of a finer edge to get in, you can do. So the likes here, so that's too narrow for the other file to get in, whereas I can just use the edge and even the point if I needed to, just to tidy that up. Now these are going to be underneath the arms, so you know, people might not see this. It's up to you how far you go tidying up with your models. If you're really keen, you can use sanding sticks. There's another YouTuber that actually I saw use these, and I'm so glad that I saw it because they're fantastic. So I got these from Amazon, so sanding sticks. I cut these in half because they're just a bit too wide as they are for doing on these size models, so just cut it in half. And then what you can do after that is just go around your model and give it a rub down. This is a much finer grade than the Games Workshop sanding stick. That's it, that leaves that lovely and smooth, and with the right application you won't even know where the sprue lines were, where the mould lines were. So now that's done, I'll get the rest of the parts prepped and then we'll start gluing it together. Okay, so this is the problem with the older models, is the sprue line going down here is quite bad. So I'll have to be delicate about maintaining the detail. Now anywhere that the detail's been lost or it's not been shown through on the sprue enough just from the manufacturing process, like for example here, the strap that holds his armor plate on is almost smooth into the material of his jumpsuit, you would call it. So when it comes to later on, I'll need to paint in that line to distinguish the two. So if you ever do lose any detail, if it doesn't show up as much, then just bear in mind that you might need to run a black line down there just to try and separate the two parts out. So just as an example, so I've already been over that with a fine file. So now just going over it with the sanding stick. So it takes it nearly completely out and brings it up to the rest. So they are useful. Okay, so sanding's done. I'm going to clear those tools out of the way. Get that out of the way. Just put on the side and then just make sure any dust is clear, because we don't want any of that drifting into the paint. Then we can start building it up. So I'll do this gradually, so I'll cut between parts so you don't have to sit here watching glue dry. We save that for later, watching paint dry. So you don't need to go overboard with the glue, just enough. Once you've been using glue for a while, and particular types of glue, particular brands of glue, you'll figure out which ones work best, which ones need more or less, drying times, all that sort of stuff. Because some plastic glues which hold two parts together, and then there's glues that will soften and merge parts together, and this kind of does the merging but not too drastically, so you don't want to get this to spill out too far, because then it will soften up the plastic around some of the detail that you'll then see. But if you make any mistakes, if a part needs adjusting or swapping out or anything like that, and you've used emerging glue, you may end up having to either cut through it or cut out some of the rough area that's left once you pry the two apart, to then be able to get them to go back together again. But the problem with glue that just holds parts together is it's a lot more likely for it to spill out, because it's got nowhere to go really. It'll just fill the void and then hold it there. So, and it's generally thicker as well, so when you push that together, it will squidge out the sides, and then you need to go around with a pointed tool just to try and clear up that excess. So I'll build up the legs and body and then let this dry. So just checking all the way around, just to make sure that the waist is just about in line with the trousers. That looks alright. So I'm going to let that dry and probably get that 5 to 10 minutes. Come back and we'll do the backpack and first arm. Let that dry, then do the second arm and head. Okay, rack. So some arms, they have certain positions, some sit better in certain positions. This is blocked up. So just check the instructions, or check how the parts sit together as a dry fit before you go ahead and use any glue. So just roughly holding it together, then you can see how it all lines up. So that looks about right. Some of them, you know, you can have loads of variation on the parts, but sometimes you'll have cut out in the detail for arms to sit in a certain position. So yeah, that looks about right. Okay. So again, we'll leave that, let that dry, just so that when it comes to positioning the head and the other arm, we don't have to worry as much about knocking any other parts that have just been glued. Okay, so gluing on the second arm and the head. Now, if you've seen any of the videos, you'll see that sometimes I leave one of the arms off, normally to get access to the chest. Now, this is a reasonably open model, so I'm going to fit all the parts together at the same time. If you're building them separately, then with Space Marines it's a lot easier because the barrels of the guns can be drilled out, and then you can use a paper clip to put into the end of the barrel, and then I don't have any examples. Oh, I've got this. So on this one, because this is a separate item, a bolter, it's not actually attached to an arm, I've just put the paper clip into an area that I know I can clean up afterwards. So it's a flat surface that I can just then take this off, the super glue that's left, fire it down, touch black, and it's done. Or you can put the paper clip into the barrel of the gun with a touch of super glue to hold it, and you can paint everything else. Then take the paperclip out, stick it onto the marine, then paint black on the end of the barrel, inside the barrel, and then silver as required. So it just gives you a bit more control. You don't need to touch the part, and if you put the paper clip through the base, you can then fit it to one of these. So it's just a little trick that I picked up. So okay, so we've just got the shoulder pad and comlink or aerial or whatever those guys call it for the helmet. So small touch of glue if it'll come. That's a bit too much. And it's all coming out at once now. One of the problems with needle points is you can have glue, if the pressure builds up in there, it'll just start running out. So just get rid of the excess before you go in. Now, small parts like that, sometimes it's difficult to position it if it's not quite right, so I want that a little bit further. So I'm just going to use my file to get it into the right position and then set. So there we have it. That's the, I'll put it on the base just so it's easy to move around. So there's the Fire Warrior built up. So I'll stop the video there. So we'll just call that the first part, prep, and then we'll come back in the second part and we'll get this painted up. Okay, so I'll see you then.